Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Brother Jim. I thought I'd come on here and we'd talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel right now. For those of you who may not have heard, Israel has declared war against Hamas because Hamas attacked them uh, at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles. And there are varying numbers given, but at the least hundreds of Israelis were murdered, and I think the last I heard 50 some Israelis, including mostly civilians, were taken hostage in Israel and taken back into the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm not going to try and tell you all what to think, because to be honest with you, what's going on is, at this point, so-called statistics that we've received. I couldn't begin to tell you what all of this means or who did it or anything like that, because I don't know. And we always have to remember, even though we've heard reports from what we consider to be reliable sources, I want you to keep in mind that those reliable sources that we listen to and trust for the most part are getting their information from other people, because none of them are there in it, with the possible exception of Amir Tsarfati. And I don't think he's even in Israel right now. But with rare exception, most of these people that we trust to tell us what's going on don't really know any more than we do, because they're using their sources that they trust. And when you start getting into that kind of thing, even though the people we trust may be passing on disinformation or false information unwittingly, in other words, not on purpose, they don't know for sure if their sources are reliable or accurate. So all that you guys are getting from any of these Watchmen or any of the other channels that are putting out explanations about what's going on and what's next and all that kind of stuff, that's all just speculation, okay? They don't know anything more about it than we do. But I did want to talk about some of the things that are going on there, and I can pretty much promise you by the time I'm done talking to you in this video, we're going to have a whole lot of questions and do a whole lot of head scratching and wonder what the answers to our questions are, because only the Lord and the very few people that are in power in the positions that are actually doing these things, they're the only ones that absolutely know for sure what's going on or who did what. But we can talk about what's happening and what it might mean and ask ourselves some questions about it. So let's begin with what happened. Early in the morning, Saturday morning, Hamas broke through the barrier fence along the Gaza Strip in several locations in the southern part of Gaza and the southern part of Israel. And the numbers that they're saying, of course, here again, like I say, we don't know these numbers for sure, how accurate they are. But basically, most of them are saying that about 1,000 militants, terrorists, came into Israel through that broken fence there and attacked southern Israel. There are reports that hundreds of Israelis were just murdered, mostly civilians, but some were military. There are rumors that one Israeli military base was overrun. Of course, here again, we don't know if they did or didn't, but this is what's being said, that they were just going house to house and breaking into civilians' houses and murdering entire families, including children and old people, and they took a bunch of hostages back over into Gaza. The report is that about 5,000 missiles and rockets were fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip in about a 10 to 12-hour period of time. Reports are also saying that for some reason, Israel's Iron Dome defense system, air defense system, didn't work properly or didn't work very well, and a lot of the rockets and missiles got through to strike their targets in Israel. So now we have to start wondering things like, why didn't the Iron Dome system work when it's always worked before? Well, there are at least 2 countries in the world that have electronic jamming capabilities that could do something like that. One of them is Russia, the other one is the United States. Now, these are the only 2 that we know of that have this kind of technology. That doesn't mean that they are the only 2. For example, Russia and Iran have a military alliance now that they just formed in the past year and a half, something like that. They signed a military cooperation act. And it could be that Russia passed along this electronic jamming technology to Iran to help them protect themselves against Israel or whoever else, Saudi Arabia, whoever else might attack them. And then Iran took it upon themselves to pass it along to the people at the Gaza Strip, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. There again, that's speculation. But something happened to their Iron Dome system that made it malfunction pretty badly and allowed the air attack from the Gaza Strip to have a significant effect inside of Israel. That's number one. How did the air defense system, the Iron Dome system, how did that happen to fail? The only reasonable or logical explanation is that it was jammed electronically. Their Iron Dome systems were electronically jammed. Who did the jamming? We don't know. There is speculation that it was Russia. I would just assume that it was America that did it, because everybody is working towards the same goal at that level of power, and that is to destroy the world and bring in the World Economic Forum to rule it with one government. So I would not put it past America to have been involved in this. But we don't know. What we do know is the Iron Dome system failed miserably this time when it's never failed before. So that meant that Israel was defenseless from the rocket attack for the most part. Now, they did intercept some, it's my understanding, but a lot of the rockets and missiles got through and hit their targets and did a lot of damage inside of Israel. The next question that we should ask ourselves is, how is the most secure country with their defense systems, with their military intelligence, with the Mossad, their internal secret agencies that have an extremely close surveillance program over the entire Gaza Strip, and especially along their border. They have electronic cameras, motion sensors, all kinds of things to know if something's going to happen along that fence line or that's going on in Gaza. They have satellite surveillance of Gaza. They watch it very closely like a hawk, because that's where most of their problems have come from, was out of Gaza. So with their intelligence agencies and their defense and surveillance systems being the best in the world, how did Hamas get through the fence and launch that kind of an attack without Israel having any clue that it was coming? Or for that matter, that America had any clue it was coming, because we are supposedly in league with Israel and helping them to keep track of what's going on in Gaza with our intelligence agencies. So how did our intelligence agencies and Mossad and the Israeli intelligence agencies, with all their surveillance and satellites and sensors and cameras and everything else, how is it that not anybody suspected or knew that this was coming in order to prevent it? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I don't see any way that they could have missed something that big. Then we have to ask ourselves, did they miss it, or did they know it was coming and just allowed it to happen for some ulterior motive? For instance, Benjamin Netanyahu may very well have known that this attack was coming and allowed it to come in order for him to consolidate his power as the leader of Israel, because he's been undergoing a lot of pressure from his own people there to try and bring his government down and to get him out of office. So it may very well be that he knew about this and allowed it to happen in order for him to consolidate his power over the country. I haven't heard anyone use the words martial law in connection with this yet, but I would assume that that whole country probably is basically under some kind of a martial law or strict orders and being enforced by their government inside of Israel. Or it may not have been Benjamin Netanyahu. He may have been clueless. It may have been somebody in the defense ministry in Israel that knew it was coming, that wanted to give Netanyahu the appearance of being a weak leader so they would have more ammunition in order to get him kicked out of office. Or it could have been America and Israel working together trying to do this, and both countries knowing that it was going to happen and neither country doing anything to keep it from happening. For whatever reasons, we could ask, ourselves, what kind of a reason would there be for something like that to happen, that we would allow something like that? And the truth of it is, we'll never know what their actual motives were, or who actually either allowed this to happen, or instigated it to happen, or supplied the means for it to happen. And we have to wonder this all the more because an attack like this from basically a third world country called Gaza, that's not technologically uh, very good. They get what they get from Iran, their weapons and things, and they have a hard time even figuring out how to use the weapons. So an attack like this, and it was a multi-front attack. They used motorized gliders to come in the sky. They had land troops that came through the fence and into 20 some southern Israeli towns and had their little murdering spree. And there was even some that were trying to come in on some rubber boats and things like that up in the northwest, up in upper Israel, up above the Gaza Strip. So the planning it takes to pull off an invasion like that takes weeks, if not a couple of months, to plan out and to get the logistics all set up for it, and for everybody to be on the same page in order for them to pull the trigger and have any kind of success. And you would think if it took 6 weeks to 2 months, or maybe even longer, for them to figure this out and put it in motion and get everything set in order to have this attack, that after weeks or months, that would have given plenty of time for people like the intelligence agencies to become aware of an invasion of that size and with that kind of intricate planning. They should have been aware of this long before this actually ever happened. But they're trying to tell us that it was a complete surprise to Israel and America and everybody else in the world. Nobody knows nothing about it. It just happened. It was a surprise. Then let's consider another possibility that it doesn't seem like anybody but a very few are even considering. It may be that Israel was either on the verge of getting ready to sign that peace deal with Saudi Arabia, or had already signed it and they just hadn't announced it yet, and that a part of that peace agreement was that Israel give up East Jerusalem for a capital and agree to a two-state solution dividing the land of Israel. And God's very clear in his word that anyone that tries to divide the land, or especially the city Zion, Jerusalem, that has his name on it, are going to come under God's anger and wrath and under a curse. And that does not preclude the Israelis themselves. If they divide their land and divide Jerusalem, God's curse is still going to stand even though it was done by Jews. So it could be God himself set all of this up and by his power kept it secret, or had it happen very quickly so there would be not much time in order to get prepared for it or try to stop it. It could be God himself that said, I'm not going to let this happen. So he allowed this, or even brought it to pass, this attack on his own people, in order to stop that peace plan, that peace and security, and then sudden destruction comes upon them. So it is entirely possible, even though we know God is orchestrating absolutely everything at this point, everything that's going on in the world is happening by his will, by his direction, by his intervention, by putting the thoughts into the right people's minds to do this and do that so he can bring his prophecies to pass and bring his will to pass in these last days, so that what he says in his word comes to pass just like he said it would. So we have to keep in mind that this could have been God's direct intervention to stop that peace plan, that peace and security of Israel being divided, stopping it before it became official, before it actually happened, and showing Israel, I don't want you doing this kind of stuff, and I'm not going to let you do this kind of stuff. So it could have been direct intervention by God himself. Are you beginning to see how many different possibilities and scenarios that this thing could have taken? And we haven't even come close to figuring out the whys of why this happened and why now. All we can do is trust that it's God's will and that he's orchestrating this whole thing to bring about the fulfillment of his prophecies of the last days, lining up the nations that need to be lined up, causing certain nations to become adversaries of Israel. It's all in God's power. So we need to consider, all of this. That's why I said at the beginning, we don't know any of this. Because like I said, the only people that actually know what's going on are the people that are actually pulling the trigger and pulling the strings and causing it to come to pass. The powers that be. Whether it's part of the World Economic Forum, it's just the powers that be in countries like Russia or even America or Israel. Because Netanyahu is not above doing things to his own people. And I didn't think I'd ever say something like that as recently as maybe 3 years ago. But I want you all, I don't know if you ever heard about this or not, but back when the COVID crap was very first starting, Israel under Netanyahu was right up there with Pfizer. And they gave Pfizer the world's largest, most detailed database, so that Pfizer could use that database to find out the best ways to affect people. The database included different gene combinations, different racial backgrounds, and all of that kind of stuff. And he gave it to Pfizer so that he could be in their good graces and so that they would do what they could to help Israel. So he turned his own people into one big database and gave it to the enemy of the people. Not many people know about that or have even heard about that, but that's what happened. That's been verified, at least as far as anything can be verified these days. And that's another thing. Just because people tell you that they verified something, you can't take that as being the truth either, because who's doing the verifying? It could very well be, and probably is, the people that's bringing all this to pass to begin with. So if somebody says something's been verified, that does not mean that it has actually been verified. It's probably propaganda. Just like when they tell you that so-and-so papers leaked out of the White House or leaked out of the CIA or leaked out of this meeting or that phone call or whatever. There's no such thing as a leak. Anytime you hear somebody say something was leaked, you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody up there at the top wanted that information out there and probably leaked it themselves and put it out there to further their own agendas, to keep their own personal narrative in line with what the people believed. So if somebody says something's verified, it probably isn't, or it's been verified by the people that did it. Or if you hear the word leaked, you know it's something that the powers that be wanted us to hear. It wasn't somebody trying to sneak it out and give us a clue into something secret that's going on. The powers that be wanted you to hear that. They're orchestrating all of this, and God is orchestrating all of them. There are rumors going around and even people making statements that the ambassador of Israel went to Russia and told the Russian people that they will use tactical nukes in the Gaza Strip if they feel like they need to. If they feel like they're about to get overrun, the ambassador of Israel told Moscow Israel will use tactical nukes. He also supposedly told Russia that Israel blames Iran for being the instigator and the one that's supplying the means and ways to do these things. They consider Iran as being the leader in all of this. And supposedly the ambassador told the Russian leaders, I can't remember if they said it was the Duma or if it was Putin or the military people up there in Russia or who he talked to, but he told the government up there that if Israel feels like it's going to be overrun, that they will use large tactical nukes on Tehran, Iran, and on Damascus. That they are at the point now, if they feel like the threat to them is so existential, they said that if they felt like Israel was about to fall, that they would employ the Samson option. And for those of you who may have never heard of the Samson option, it's a nuclear protocol that Israel has in place that if they feel like their nation is about to collapse, they'll use the Samson option, which means they will send nukes in every direction at all of their perceived and actual real enemies all at one time. In other words, it'll be a mass nuclear attack on a lot of different countries that they feel like are their enemies. And supposedly the ambassador of Israel told Russia, if it gets to that point, we will use the Samson option and we'll send every nuke we have in every direction at all of our enemies, real or perceived. So whether that is true or not, there again, we can't know. This is just what's being said, what's being reported. But we all know that there's people in the media that have their own agendas and they tell us what they want us to think and what they want us to hear in order to further their own agendas. So whether that was a real thing or not, the ambassador, the fact that they're talking like that in the media shows you that they are once again talking about nuclear war like it's nothing. Like, if you mess with us to a certain point, we will nuke you. And that's going all, it's not just with Israel and Iran and Gaza and all that, it's also with Ukraine and Russia. Russia's threatened to use nukes, either tactical nukes in battles or strategic nukes to take out entire cities and countries. And Russia and America are both talking like that's no big deal, like they think that somehow that they can survive a nuclear war against each other, when anyone with a half a brain knows that whoever starts something like that, the end of it is the end of the world. Now, we do know that that's not going to happen, or if it does happen, a widespread nuclear war around the world, it's not going to happen until the very end of the 7 year tribulation. And the fact that it says in the Bible that if God didn't end it at that point, there wouldn't be any humans left in the world. So maybe that is an indication that at the very end, around the time of Armageddon and all of that, that there could be an all-out global nuclear war and just completely mess the world up, because at that point the Antichrist and Satan's going to have nothing to lose. The Lord's getting ready to appear and put an end to all of it anyway, so they may just think this is their last big hurrah, their last chance of doing damage and wiping out the earth. And whoever the powers that be underneath the Antichrist at that time, the 7 kings that are left, and whatever other powers that be there are, he may have all of them start wars and start sending their nukes all over the place. But we know it's not going to happen in the near future, because you can't have a world war, nuclear war happen during the tribulation, because the tribulation is God's word, and everything that's in there telling us about what happens in the tribulation is going to happen. Now, if you've got an all-out global nuclear war going on, the things in Revelation are not going to have an opportunity to pass. You know what I'm saying? There will be all of those things, the swarms of locusts that come out of the pit, the famines, the wars, all of that stuff, all of that is going to happen because God said it's going to happen. And so you can't have an all-out nuclear holocaust in this world until all of the things that are in Revelation have had their chance to be fulfilled. And we know some of those things don't happen until the end of the tribulation period. Like all of the water turning into blood and 100-pound hailstones and all that stuff. All of that happens before there is any kind of a nuclear global holocaust. So if the world ever does get to the point where there is a global nuclear holocaust, where all the nukes everywhere are all flying all over the place and just destroying the earth, that's not going to happen until the very end of the 7 years. Probably within a day or two. I don't know how it'll work, but very soon after, or I mean very shortly before the Lord's appearance at his second coming, because the world couldn't survive that. Some people are saying that this is the beginning of the Psalm 83 war. Well, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know if that's true or not. I can tell you my opinion is that the Psalm 83 war happened back in 1948 and 49, right after Israel became a nation, when the surrounding countries all attacked Israel and tried to destroy them right out of the chute. Or there's also an opinion, a widely accepted opinion, that the Psalm 83 war was not actually a prediction or a prophecy of a war, but it was simply a prayer. It was never meant to be an indication of an actual war. And then there is those with a school of thought that think that the Psalm 83 war has not happened yet and that it will happen. Like I said, I've always thought it, if there, I've always thought if Psalm 83 was an actual prophecy for a war and not just a prayer, that would have been what happened back in 48. But there again, I don't know. That's just my opinion. If you have a different opinion, if you think this could be Psalm 83, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't know. You may be right. I'm not, I've told you guys this before, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm just someone who's been reading the Bible and studying it for 50 years. And all of this prophecy stuff, it's not new to me. I mean, I've been following it for probably 25, 30 years, but I could be wrong about these things. Don't ever think that that I couldn't be wrong about something. Especially in videos like this, I'm telling you I don't know. And anytime I don't know something, I will tell you I don't know. I won't pretend like I do, or take some scripture somewhere and twist it to say something I wanted to say, like a lot of them do. So when you watch these Watchmen channels, which the only one I ever watch anymore is Tom Coates over on Watchmen River, I think it's called. And that's because he doesn't go into a whole lot of speculation. Basically, he just tells the stories of what's going on, kind of like a newscast more than a prediction or a prophecy thing. Because I don't watch any of the other ones anymore, because they'll tell you in the video, I don't know, I could be wrong, whatever. But then they'll go and make a 45-minute to an hour long video, and everything that comes out of their mouth, they're speaking it like it's the truth, like it's a fact. Even though they say they could be wrong, they're not presenting it as if they could be wrong. They're presenting it as of, this is what's going to happen, and then they couch it at the end of it or at the beginning of it and say, now I could be wrong about this, but then they spend an hour trying to convince you that they're not wrong and getting people's hopes up. I have no use for Watchmen channels anymore, and I know some of you do. Some of my dearest sisters and brothers uh, watch these Watchmen channels, and even though they constantly are disappointing people, there are people, I guess, that get something positive out of it. So if you do, good for you. But I personally don't get anything out of them anymore. In fact, most of the time they just aggravate me to death, because a lot of the time the things they're saying are misrepresentations of what's going on, trying to make it fit into what they want it to fit into, so that the rapture can happen during the Feast of Trumpets, or during Yom Kippur, or during Rosh Hashanah. And just as soon as one of them comes and goes, they're right on to the next thing. Is it this month? And then that month comes and goes. Is it this month? Here's what we're looking at. And it constantly keeps people on edge, wondering and thinking, well, I'm going to just drop it because I don't want to get anybody upset with me. Like I say, if you get something positive out of them, then by all means keep watching them. I personally don't get anything positive out of it. It's my opinion that we should occupy until he comes. We are at the point now where we know all of the signs have been fulfilled that need to be fulfilled for the end times. I can't think of a single sign that the Bible talks about that hasn't already been fulfilled, isn't being fulfilled, or the groundwork for it being fulfilled isn't already being laid. This is definitely the end of the last season. Everybody knows that. We don't need to have one more city got bombed and people died in the bombing stories to know that war is hell. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make the rapture day any closer. The rapture day is an appointed time. It's going to come at the appointed time, regardless of what current events are, regardless of if it's a feast day or not, regardless of what year it is, or how many charts and graphs you have to prove what you say is a good chance that it's going to be that way. The Bible is clear. We don't know the day or the hour, and anyone who thinks that they do, they're just they're not going along with what the Bible says. So I think that it is our duty now to occupy until he comes, because Luke 21:28 says, when you see all of these things begin to happen, that's when you're supposed to look up and lift up your head, because your redemption draws near. And our redemption is the redemption of our bodies at the rapture. And we see all of these things beginning to happen, and some of them have been happening for a long while now, for years. So we are supposed to be looking up, not looking around. We know the world has gone to heck in a handbasket. We don't need any more stories that prove it. It's already been proven 1,000 times over. Every day we have more stories of more crap that's going on. Things are getting worse every passing day. Nothing's getting fixed. Nothing at all is getting fixed. It's all just piling up more and more and more on top of itself, of the wickedness and the evil that's taken over this clown world that we are stuck in for the moment. So spend at least part of your time thinking on the things above, thinking on eternity, and doing the work of God in whatever your little sphere of influence might be. If it's just giving a cup of cold water to the guy that mows your lawn, do that. If it's sending somebody that you know is lonely a card in the mail every once in a while to let them know they're not alone in the world, do that. I have one sister, when she has something delivered or leaves a tip at a restaurant or something, she puts a little note in with the tip, so that when they pick the tip up, they get that little gospel message. You don't have to do something huge. You don't have to have a big YouTube channel. Lord knows I don't, but I'm still on here pressing and doing what I can do, what little I am able to do, for whatever few people might decide to watch these videos, and try to be a blessing to them. It's never my intention to upset anybody, but I have an obligation to always speak the truth to the best of my ability. Don't let anybody in this world tell you they know exactly what's going on, because they don't. Some of their sources may be legitimate, some of them are most likely not legitimate. The numbers that we get on dead and wounded, we're having to take other people's word for it. And since we don't know those other people, if they're to be believed, or if they have any scruples or not, or if they're bought off or paid off or blackmailed into saying those things, we don't know. So you need to take absolutely everything you hear from any source with a grain of salt during these days, because we're told this is going to be a time of great deception, and the deception is going to be so severe and so believable that even the elect may be fooled for a short time. I still get fooled from time to time, but we won't be fooled forever. Something may sound like it's legitimate, and then we give it a little bit more thought, we realize it's not, and we're not fooled. But the vast majority of the people now have reprobate minds. They're blind. They don't recognize what's true and what's a lie anymore. And to be honest with you, I don't think most of them care. The morals and the values in this world are practically non-existent. The lawlessness is getting completely out of hand. We have things happen like what just happened in Israel. And by the way, before I forget to say it, and I'll probably try and end with this because this video is getting pretty long, most of us now, won't allow ourselves to get too excited about anything that happens, because we have learned from experience that no matter how big an event is and how much it is associated with Bible prophecy, we've been burned so many times when it looks like it's the absolute end of everything, and God hits the pause button. and holds it right there. It doesn't get worse, it doesn't get better. It's just like it's in limbo. Like the thing with Ukraine and Russia. When that started, I thought, well, maybe this is the beginning of the end. Maybe this will work into the Gog Magog war and all that. And I was excited in my spirit about it. But right when it looked like everything was about to blow up with Russia and Ukraine, God, for all intents and purposes, put a restraint on it. It's still going on, but it's not escalating into a nuclear uh, attack or anything like that. It's just moving along, plugging along, a little here, a little there every day. And there's other things like that too, uh, where something looks like when we had the bank runs. Do you all remember them? It's hard to remember anything anymore, but the first part of this year, back in February and March, we had three big banks fail, one after the other here in this country. And it looked like there was going to be bank runs all over the country. It looked like the economy was going to crash. And what happened? That's not even in the news hardly anymore. Nobody thinks about it anymore. But our economy is still on the verge of collapse. It could happen in a moment. So when something big like this happens, it gets us excited because, especially in this case, it's Israel that's involved in it, and we watch Israel as God's timepiece for what his plans are. And I will tell you, it's exciting to me even what little bit has happened already concerning Israel. Now, it may be, and I don't want to bum anybody out, but from past experience, we know this thing may build up for a week or two, and then all of a sudden God puts a pause on it, and it seems like it's over with, or it's not going to be what we hoped it would. But whatever it is that's going on right now, because it's Israel, it is a big deal. Whether it happens in the next week or two that we go home, or whether we have to wait several more months, this is the first step in the battles and the wars that are going to take place in Israel. It is a first step. It's legitimate to be excited about it. It may be a big flash in the pan, like I say, for a couple weeks and then die down, and people get disappointed and think it's not, one more disappointment. But it did happen. It's still happening. We can only speculate as to how big this thing's going to get. But even if it does like some of the other things, it seems like God put a pause on it and restrained what we wanted to happen from happening. It is still a first step, and it actually did happen and is happening, and it is a big deal, and it is a big indicator as to how close we are to going home. It may still yet be a couple, 3 months. I still am hoping that we're out of here before the snow flies this year, and we very well could be. Uh, it's self-preservation at this point, at least for me, not to allow my spirit to get too excited and let it run wild in my imagination about this is it, this is it, this is it. I'm hoping this is it, but I'm not going to let it get to the point where if it's not it quite yet, I'm not going to be all disappointed and everything, because I know, like I said, even if this isn't the big push, this is the groundwork for the big push. This is getting things ready for the big push. This is a big sign, and it does show us that we are closer and closer all the time to leaving this clown world that we're stuck in. So I guess I've talked long enough. I'm just going to go ahead and finish out this video. But go ahead, be excited. This is a big deal. But just realize this could be just step one of 2 or 3 steps. It could be an ongoing thing with ups and downs for the next month or 2 or maybe 3. But it is the beginning of the end, okay? That's the point I'm trying to make. Hold on to this. This is a big indicator that the Lord is soon coming to take us all home to heaven. All right, brothers and sisters. God bless you all. I love you all. And I feel in my heart, my spirit, I will be seeing you all one day, very soon now, on that golden shore over yonder. Be blessed. Good night.